Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How are you this evening?
You know, it's been a hectic week in my day job, but I'm really actually looking forward to chatting a little soccer here today and looking forward to the upcoming weekend and the big match at Spruce Meadows.
Yeah, soccer can be a great distraction from real life. So happy to chat a lot of things soccer with you this evening.
Yeah, and if you are a new listener to the podcast, Scott, our regular question, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So we are a soccer podcast and we focus on the sport in Calgary specifically. We talk about amateur, collegiate, and professional soccer. We talk about the Calgarian teams and players from the local soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur levels up to the university and professional leagues.
And this episode, we're going to discuss a few different topics. We're going to talk about about Cavalry and about their playoff matchup against Forge last weekend and the upcoming match this weekend against Pacific. We have two interviews this week, and one of them is with Anna Hauer from the University of Memphis Tigers, and we also have an interview with Grace Mwasalla with MacEwen Griffins, and we'll talk a little bit more about some U Sports and some state updates, and I think that's going to fill us up this week.
Yeah, it's rare for us to do two interviews in one episode. Definitely two great interviews this week. Two players who have had excellent 2023 post-secondary seasons. Anna Hauer down in the NCAA Division I with the University of Memphis Tigers. Obviously a program that has a lot of Calgary connections, as we've talked about in the past. And then Grace Mwasalla, who I actually learned from this interview, unfortunately suffered a knee injury. But up until then, she was having a very good fall with MacEwen University.
They're both Calgarians that are playing away from home that have a real knack for finding the net. We'll get to their interviews in a few minutes. Let's delve into Cavalry and we'll talk a little bit about last weekend. So at Spruce Meadows, Forge came to town and in the first round of the playoffs, and Forge, they left town with the victory, 2-1 over the Cavs, and first loss in a while.
Yeah, this was Cavalry's first loss in 10 matches. They came into it on a 9-game unbeaten run and a 5-game win streak. So they were the heavy favorites because Forge actually didn't come into this on a very good run of form. They lost their 2 last games of the regular season and they only won 4 of their last 10. So I was expecting a Cavalry victory, but overall, I mean, Forge, I think, deserved the win. Cavalry did start very well and they did finish with a lot of tempo as well. But Forge did enough in kind of the middle of the match to secure the win. So basically, the rundown of the game, Forge went up 1-0 off a own goal. I think it was Jesse Daly. It was a corner kick. Yeah, Marco Carducci tried to punch the ball out. It hit Daly on the back of his head and actually just went into the net. So kind of an unlucky way to go down 1-0. But Forge took a 2-0 lead, quite deservedly, I thought, in the second half. And who else but Kyle Becker, who always seems to produce a great performance when he comes to Calgary. He put a shot into the top corner. Very nicely taken. He was actually my man of the match. He was also the player for Forge who swung in that corner kick that led to the own goal. So Cavalry were 2-0 down as the game kind of creeped towards the end. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. subbed in Joe Mason, who's been mostly an off-the-bench striker this season. It was a good move because just a few minutes later, he got his head on the end of a corner kick, and that was at the near post. Nicely done by him, and it was 2-1. From that point forward, Cavalry really put a lot of pressure on Forge's defense, but Forge have always been good at sitting back, absorbing attacks, getting their center backs' heads on crosses out of the box, and yeah, Cavalry just kind of ran out of time, lost the match 2-1.
When I was watching the match, it just looked like another Forge performance where they just know kind of what they need to do to get the result that they need, and a little bit of luck on that own goal, but that Becker strike, that was brilliant. And it was unfortunate, everything had seemed to be going Cavalry's way for the last several games, so this was one where the breaks didn't fall their way, and the other team, they capitalized, and Hamilton will be the host of the final, and the Cavs have play one this weekend to earn their right to go to the final now.
Yeah, Forge, I think, really proved why they're such a strong playoff team. So this is going to be Forge's fifth straight trip to the final. Literally every season of the CPL, Forge has been in the final. It just, they came into the match on a pretty mediocre run of form, but when they need a result or a performance, they get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And watching them play, I mean, it didn't seem like this team was out of touch at all. Like they were clicking on all fronts for a big of the game. And like I said, Kyle Becker, real leadership from him in the midfield. Cavalry, not a bad performance. They definitely had the worst luck, but overall, I mean, after the game, I thought Tommy Wheeldon Jr. and Dan Klomp, who are the two Cavalry reps who spoke during the press conference, I thought they'd be a little more frustrated. They actually just kind of shrugged off the loss and said, you know what, we'll go again next week. This wasn't a knockout game, thankfully, and we'll just try and get it done against Pacific at home.
So just to recap, the match against Pacific at Spruce Meadows Saturday at 2, and the winner of that match will go on to Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton on Saturday, October 28th, and that'll be the finals. So it's do or die this weekend.
Yeah, this is going to be the second last match of the season. There's only 3 teams left in the running. I have to think that Forge has the upper hand simply because the final is going to be on their own turf. I've talked to a couple Cavalry players over the years who've all said that, Tim Hortons Field is a tough place to get a result. It's windy, the pitch is really big, the turf combined with that wind seems to make the ball roll super fast, which I feel seems to benefit the way Forge play. But that being said, every CPL season, every CPL final has been won by the away team, which is pretty interesting if you think about it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it was Forge in 2019 winning it in Calgary. 2020 was the Island Games. 2021, Pacific won in Hamilton. And then 2022 was Forge winning in Ottawa. So
yeah,
every season has been an away team winning.
Nice random bit of info there. I did not connect the dots on that myself. So cool.
But I mean, one thing that is also an interesting bit of info is, and I didn't believe this at first, Cavalry has not won a playoff game.
Oh, really? I guess that would be true, wouldn't it? Based on, again, another thing I never really thought about. But yeah, sort of working through the years, that does make sense. So
yeah, like if we think about it, their 2 playoff games in 2019 were both against Forge. They lost both of them. 2020 was the Island game.
They did lose, yeah.
Was it Forge or Halifax they lost to? One of those two.
Yeah, they did lose right away, though. Yeah, I remember that.
And then 2021, they lost to Pacific. And then in 2022, they tied Forge at home and then lost in Hamilton in the semifinals. So, yeah, Cavalry is a team that is kind of choked quite a bit in the postseason. And now they're going to have to stop doing that. And they're going to have to get their first ever playoff win against Pacific.
Yeah, and with the way that they've played Pacific, I feel like going into this match, like they've got to be considered the favorites. But I would say that being said, the pressure's on them. They're the ones that are going to be playing at home. They're the ones that have the really good season. So I would say Pacific right now could probably walk in and say that anything we get out of this is unexpected bonus at this point. So I think the pressure is going to be on the Cavs. And I think they'll be favored, and I think they've got a pretty good chance of winning. But it's the pressure's on them.
I think you're right. Yeah, and I agree that if they were going to be playing Halifax, I'd be a little less confident in Cavalry getting a victory. Halifax was playing really, really well, and they were arguably the team that should have won that game against Pacific last week, but Pacific managed to win it 1-0. I was looking at the overall series between Cavalry and Pacific this year. I thought it was fairly even, but it actually wasn't. Cavalry won 3, and then they drew the other one. So Cavalry claimed 10 points out of a possible 12 against Pacific this season. They also played in the Cup very early on, back in April, and that was a draw, which Pacific then went on to win the penalty shootout. But overall, Cavalry have had the upper hand over Vancouver Islanders this season.
Well, we'll be watching that one with great interest and talking about it next week. Let's move on. we're going to get to our first interview this week. And I guess as a bit of a preamble, we should probably talk about every Calgary soccer fan's favorite NCAA team, University of Memphis. We should give a bit of an update because this team has 4 Calgarians on it. Probably the one that most people would be most familiar with is Maya Jones, who's playing her 5th year and previous podcast guest. She's with the club. And also there have been some mid-season rankings done by Top Drawer Soccer, and Maya Jones has been ranked 31st place overall in the top 100 upperclassmen. And I think that shows pretty well on the season she's doing. But when you start talking about our podcast guest, she's also hit the Top Drawer Soccer rankings as well. So we're going to interview Anna Hauer, and she's a freshman at University of Memphis. And in that top 100 freshman of the year so far in women's NCAA soccer, she's ranked number 18. So that's a pretty high number, and speaks to her performance thus far.
Absolutely, yeah. Anna Hauer is the youngest of the 4 Calgarians who are playing for Memphis. The other 2 would be Isabel Monk and Grace Doherty. So there's the Foothills WFC connection down in Memphis. Anna Hauer has come in, though, and had a solid inaugural NCAA season. So I'll let her talk about it. But it was good to chat with her about her successful first year of post-secondary soccer.
Yeah, and we're recording this on a Thursday night, and Memphis actually played tonight. And in that match, they won 4-0, and Anna scored another goal. So she's now got 7 goals this season. So as the season began, I'm just looking at her game-by-game stats. She played less the first few games, but just to get a bit of an idea, in the last 4 games, she scored 4 goals. So she's definitely been coming on strong here as the season has progressed, and it's hard to argue from a freshman season standpoint. I think you couldn't really ask for much more than this.
No, she's definitely earned that top 20 ranking by Top Drawer Soccer. So it seems like she's really hit the ground running in Memphis. And yeah, it seemed like this is the point where, if she keeps scoring, the coach has to keep picking her, right? Like that's kind of how it works when you're picking your team sheet and you want to decide which striker to field. So good for her. And I guess I'll let her take it away from here.
Yeah, let's run the interview now. I'd like to welcome Anna Hauer to the podcast. Anna is a Calgarian, and she is currently in her freshman season with the University of Memphis Tigers, and she's having a pretty standout freshman season. Welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
So can we maybe just start by talking a little bit about your background? I know that, you're from Calgary, and prior to going to Memphis, you were spending time with the Whitecaps, but can you sort of tell us about your soccer journey?
Yeah, so I actually played soccer from a young age, like 4, and I kind of played soccer and hockey up to like 13. I kind of had to choose, and I ended up choosing soccer. So I played at Southwest United for a couple of years, and then I actually ended up moving to Foothills. And then after the UWS season, Lee Tucker helped me get to the Whitecaps program, so I was able to go over there and live in Vancouver to finish like from grade 11 to 12, and then just be a part of the Whitecaps program in Vancouver. And then that also opened the gates to being on the Canada U17 team.
As I mentioned, your freshman season at Memphis has been going really quite well. I noticed actually that Top Drawer Soccer had you listed as the number 18 freshman across the nation this year. And I'm not sure if there have been other rankings, but I saw that one. So congrats on that. Like, how does it feel knowing that a lot of people are considering you one of the top freshmen in the nation this year?
It's really exciting that like I even have the opportunity to play as a freshman, and I'm happy that the coaches trust me to be on the field as a freshman and just having the chance to even play. And I'm surrounded by like people from Calgary, like Maya Jones, for example, and Sarah Miller, like 5th-year seniors who've done a lot already in Memphis, and it's really cool to like play with them. It's like I'm really excited that I was considered to be one of the top freshmen.
The connection with the University of Memphis and Calgary, you already mentioned in that previous answer about Maya Jones and the other Calgarians, how much of a factor was it knowing that there were the other Calgarians there in your decision to join Memphis?
I think it played like a huge part just because I've seen like success of them in the program, and just like overall the program was pretty successful. But it was nice to know like that people from like where I've been and like what the level I was at, that they were able to have success there. So I think just watching their journeys made it more like intriguing for me to come, as well as just playing with them.
Right.
I'd like to ask what you think about the level of NCAA Division One. Obviously, this is your first exposure to it, but it seems like you've really hit the ground running. But what are some of the biggest challenges you faced at this level, and how have you felt about your own adaptation to it?
I think the biggest thing that was different from like college soccer to what I was playing before is the game is just like faster and more direct, I'd say, and like more physical. Like the girls are bigger and faster and stronger. So for me, just like being able to like match that like physicality and speed and stuff like took me a little bit, and like the speed of play almost like before I could almost take more touches and I'd have more time on the ball, but it took me a while to adapt to like taking less touches or maybe not beating as many people and like learning like kind of a quicker style of play, I'd say.
And this past summer, you played in League One BC with the Whitecaps. What was that experience like? What are your thoughts about League One BC?
I really enjoyed League One BC. That was my second season playing. I think it'll continue to probably get bigger and more competition. I'd say that some of the like teams aren't as strong as others. Like it's like very divided. It's like either really strong or like not to the level. But I think like over time, it's like going to be a really good league.
So were you living with billets then when you go out to Vancouver?
Yeah, so I actually billeted first with Izzy Monk, my first year being in Vancouver. So I lived with her. And then my best friend Naima from Calgary as well, who's at West Virginia, lived with me this year. Or this past year. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Vancouver's a nice place to spend the summer, I can imagine.
Yes, it's nice.
Talking about yourself as a player, what do you believe are like your strongest attributes or the qualities that you feel set you apart and contribute to your success?
I think my biggest thing is taking people on 1v1. It's probably my strongest attribute, and like finding the net, finding ways to score goals or even assist goals, and just overall just a hard worker.
Was dribbling something like, did you put a lot of effort and time into that when you were younger? I mean, what were you doing to kind of become good at going against defenders 1v1?
I'd work a lot on 1v1s like throughout my time like playing soccer, but I'd also have like private technical sessions where I'd like work on that stuff. So I'd go like an hour before training, work on technical session, and then try like use that in my practice like the hour later.
And what would you say is the secret to being, a good player attacking people 1v1, or is it mostly just down to time commitment and doing it over and over?
Well, I think the biggest thing is like having the confidence in yourself to actually go at the player and know that not every time you're not going to get around the person, and like believing in yourself that then maybe if you didn't get it the first time to go again. And I guess a big thing is timing as well, as when you're going to make the move. Can't be too close to the defender. And the biggest thing I'd say too is once you've made that move to accelerate after, and like a change of pace can really like move defenders or even like body feints.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So looking ahead, Anna, what are your goals, aspirations for the rest of this season and for your soccer career in general?
For the rest of the season, obviously we're going to try to go all the way in the end, or I guess just focusing on winning the season and conference tournament. And then this is a really talented group, I'd say, and I think we can go even all the way in NCAA. So winning those types of big championships. For like my overall soccer career, I really want to go play professional soccer, maybe overseas somewhere, and hopefully be a part of the Canadian national team one day.
Yeah, that's great. Last thing I'd like to ask you, Anna, is about balancing academics and soccer commitments. I know that can be a big part of of post-secondary sport. And how has it been for you, balancing your courses with your training commitments and your traveling?
I think like the first few weeks was a bit like eye-opening because in high school you kind of have a lot of time, you don't travel a lot, and there's not as many classes. So like the first few weeks, I felt like pretty like overwhelmed and like finding a way to balance. But once I kind of started figuring it out and like making like weekly plans of what I'm gonna do for school while I'm balancing soccer, it really helps. So now I feel like it's pretty easy now, I'd say. But like if we travel a lot, sometimes I get like a bit behind, but balancing it, I feel like it's time management too.
Yeah, and when you're playing at a high level from a young age onward, it's kind of something you get used to.
Yeah,
for sure.
Scott's not mentioning it, but he was a bit of a player back in the day, so he knows what that's like. He played at a reasonably high level when he was younger. So I never did.
No, definitely not NCAA Div 1 though. Let's figure it out.
No, but your UC is okay.
Yeah. But no, that, like I said, that was my last question for you, Anna. But thanks for joining us.
Congrats on a great season so far, and we hope it continues on into the rest of the season, and we'll be following along with your career going forward, with a lot of interest. So thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it, and all the best.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you very much to Anna Hauer for taking the time to do the interview, and we'll keep watching the University of Memphis. I believe earlier this week they were ranked number 9 or number 10. I think it depended on which poll you were looking at, but they're really in the top 10 nationally, and that doesn't account for this win that they notched here on Thursday night. So it's going to be interesting to see how far they can go.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite the story that one of the best university soccer teams in the U.S. has sizable contingent of Calgary players on it. That's really cool.
Let's move on to U Sports, and we'll start by talking about U Sports women's. Their regular season ended last weekend, so let's talk about the Dinos. And they played 2 matches. They played MacEwen. They tied 1-1. I believe, Scott, you refer to that one as the Diogo Raposo Derby, which is accurate. And then the Dinos finished off with a victory against University of Alberta 3-0. So that puts them into third place in the Prairie Division. Their record was 8-2-4. And their playoff matchup, they're going to have to play number 5 nationally ranked Trinity Western on Friday, October 27th. And their national ranking right now is number 10. They were unranked last week, but they're back up to number 10. They've got the week off, and next week they got to play a tough match against Trinity Western.
Yeah, it was a pretty decent finish to the regular season for the Dinos. 4 points to finish with a top 3 placement in their division. I think Trinity Western is going to be a very tough matchup for them. Do you know if that's going to be in Langley, or is that going to be at the U of C?
I presume it's going to be out in BC because they finished higher. I think they were in second place in the Pacific Division, and they're higher ranked. So I just sort of presumed it was there, but I actually don't know that.
Okay, but regardless, I think that's a tough opponent for the Dinos. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare.
The Mount Royal women's team, they lost a couple matches over the weekend to Trinity Western and University of Fraser Valley. They ended up with 7th place in the Pacific Division, a record of 4-7-3. So yeah, that Pacific Division is pretty tough when you're the Alberta team coming in there. So that'll wrap up the Cougar season for this year. And on the women's U Sports side, we'll be focusing on the Dinos next week.
Right. Yeah, the Cougars had a pretty tough last weekend, losing 5-0 to Trinity Western, and then following that up with a 3-0 loss to Fraser Valley. So 8 goals against and 0 goals for. I presume that's on a road trip, right? That was out in Langley and
yes, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So tough last trip. I wonder if, I think once it was no longer mathematically possible, maybe that just took the wind out of their sails.
Yeah. Our second guest this week is Grace Mwasalla. And Grace, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, she's Calgarian. She's with MacEwen University. And earlier in the year, she was scoring a lot of goals, especially winning goals at key times. She was having a fantastic season. Unfortunately, as it's talked about in this interview, she had a knee injury, so she's out of action right now. But even though she's on the sidelines for the rest of this season, we reached out to Grace, and even though she's doing rehab and stuff, she was able to do a bit of an interview for us.
Yeah, and even before this U Sports season, she was playing really well in League One. So she was having a great 2023, and very unfortunate to have suffered a bad knee injury. Hopefully she can recover fully from that and come back strong next year as well.
Yeah, so we'll run that right. So I'd like to welcome Grace Mwasalla to the podcast. Grace is with MacEwen University and their women's soccer team, and she's a native of Calgary. Welcome to the podcast, Grace.
Thanks for having me.
Now that your season is complete, the regular season, how do you feel about the team's performance so far? Getting first place in the Prairie Division, are you happy with that result thus far?
Yeah, we definitely have big goals this season, and that was one of the boxes we checked off. We finished our season 10-2-2, and that's the best record we've had since joining Ken West. So we're definitely trending in the right direction, and I'm proud of our performance so far.
And for yourself, I know that you suffered an injury several games ago, and actually before we started hitting the record button, I found out it's actually a bit more serious and long-term than I had realized originally. Do you want to talk about that for a couple minutes?
Yeah, so on September 17th, during our game, I tore my ACL. So it's been about a month now, and I'm still in the pre-surgery kind of process, just trying to get my range of motion and looking to strengthen before heading into surgery so that when I come out, I'm strong and ready to hit rehab.
That is unfortunate. I did want to ask a little bit about top 10 rankings and from an outsider's perspective, looking at this, and I see that MacEwen won the Prairie Division, yet you haven't cracked the top 10 this year in the national rankings. I kind of found that odd. I was a bit surprised at that because, it just seems like you should be in there. So we had talked a little bit prior to recording. You said that's more regarding previous season and stuff. But do you find that the team finds that motivating in any way, or does that make no difference? It's
motivating, but it's not our biggest focus. We know that it's baby steps throughout the whole season, and we just got to tackle things in stride and not look too ahead. So we're not in the top 10, but we're still playing our way and we're still finding results. And I think that's the best part about it. We don't have to be top 10 to feel like we're a top 10 kind of team.
Although you're from Calgary, you've spent the last few years really being based in Edmonton. And I know last summer you played League One Alberta with St. Albert. Do you want to talk about League One Alberta and what that experience was like?
Yeah, this exhibition series, I think it was a good first kind of trial run for League One Alberta. And I think it was successful, and I'm looking forward to the growth of it. Just being able to stay here in Edmonton and play with a few of my teammates at MacEwen and still be coached by Dean, I think it was good leading into this season. And I'm looking forward to how the rest of League One will proceed moving forward.
On that same topic of League One, I wanted to mention this. I know that your previous coach with Blizzard, when you were playing in Calgary, Diogo Raposo, you had to face him in League One, and you've also had to face him as he's coaching the Dinos. What's it like to face your old coach like that?
I think Diogo really knows me as a player, so it's a kind of chess match, I guess, when I'm playing against his kind of team, because not only was he my previous coach, but I also played with a bunch of his players as well. So we're very familiar with each other, and for 90 minutes we are opponents, but after the game, sometimes he'll shoot me a text, and we chat a bit, and it's just good to know, even though he's coaching the Dinos, he's still rooting for me and still supporting me.
Yeah, actually, one thing I was going to mention, we interviewed Diogo prior to the League One Alberta final, and one of the questions that we had asked at that point was, what's it going to be like to face you? And he basically said the same thing. He said that you know each other well, but you're rooting for each other, even though maybe not for exactly those 90 minutes.
Exactly, yeah.
You still have lots of connections to Calgary. So even though you've been playing and going to school in Edmonton, you're still making it back to Calgary on a pretty regular basis. You still have family and lots of connections here. And that's correct?
Yeah, my family's back in Calgary still. And normally I'll come back definitely for Christmas. This weekend, it being a bye weekend, I'm going home actually tomorrow, and I'll stay there for the weekend. So that'll be good.
Excellent. Looking ahead, I know you've got surgery and rehab front of your mind, but what are your longer term goals and aspirations for your career in soccer, including, university and beyond?
Yeah, I definitely want to continue playing soccer for as long as possible, and I'm definitely looking to continue to play after my time at MacEwen's over. I'd definitely like to go pro. My biggest goal, I think, would be to represent Canada and just to kind of strive for that.
That's great. Well, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. And we wish you all the best in your surgery and your rehab. And we're going to continue to follow along with your career with great interest and be rooting for you. So thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Grace Mwasalla for taking the time to do the interview today. And as we mentioned, we're wishing her all the best in her rehab, and we'll be catching up with her next year, I'm sure. Let's talk about U Sports Men's now. And Mount Royal, they played a couple matches last weekend. They defeated University of Alberta 2-1, and they tied MacEwen 1-1. So the season is not quite complete yet. There's one final match this upcoming Saturday. It's the Crowchild Classic. But first place in the Prairie Division seems almost certain. I think a bunch of things have to happen for them to get knocked out of first and put into second. So I think first place is pretty close to a done deal. They're definitely in the playoffs, and their ranking nationally is still number 5.
That's a really big win for them against Alberta, isn't it? Because they were kind of jostling for first for a while, weren't they, Alberta?
Yes, Alberta's one of the teams that is a stronger team that has been behind them. So yeah, this definitely separated out Mount Royal from everybody else, that victory for sure.
And then a MacEwen as well. I mean, good draw overall. And again, I think that was a case where maybe they were resting their starters after a tough match against the Golden Bears the day before.
For the Dinos, they tied MacEwen as well, 4-4. That would have been an interesting one. Eight goals. And they also played Alberta, and they lost 1-0. So their position in the playoffs is still a little bit less clear. They're currently in 4th place. They could move to 3rd place, which is possible if they can get a result in the Crowchild Classic. It is also possible they could drop down to 5th, but that seems rather unlikely. A bunch of things would have to happen. So they've got the Crowchild Classic coming up. It looks like the playoffs are going to be happening. It's just exactly where they're going to be. And I think from the point of view, you always want to be in the top 3 so you can avoid that play-in game, I guess. But yeah, they seem to be in the mix, but exactly where they end up yet, that's still in question.
Yeah, and I think this will be a really interesting Crowchild Classic because, like you mentioned, MRU is pretty much gonna finish in regardless, and I would imagine they're gonna want to rest some of their starters. And then you have the Dinos coming in who do still have positioning to play for, so they're really going to be going for it. But MRU is so strong, and they're going to be at their home pitch. I still feel like that's a tough place to go and get a result for the Dinos. I hope it's a good sized crowd. I was actually really hoping that Cavalry would beat Forge last weekend, so they'd have the bye this weekend, and I could go watch the Crowchild Classic instead. I'm not sure. I think those 2 games overlap this weekend, so
I think there's at least a partial overlap. It would be a challenge to. I don't think you could go to both of them and see both of them in their entirety.
Yeah, which is too bad, but obviously, kind of hard to avoid at this point of both seasons. But if you're a fan of local university soccer, definitely go check out the Crowchild Classic at MRU this Saturday.
All right, let's move over to the ACAC and talk a little bit of SAIT. On the men's side, the SAIT men lost. They lost to Red Deer 2-1, which is their first loss of the season and probably their first close game of the season, actually. And then they followed that up with a win against Lethbridge 7-0. So they're in first place in the South Division. They've clinched for playoff spot. They do play one more match this weekend. Their national ranking dropped. It was number 2. Now they're number 3. So a bit of a surprise on the men's side. I guess we've just been so used to seeing them just demolish everybody. And then I remember when I looked at this result, I was like, wait a second, is that right? And yes, it is. So So we had that on the men's side, and on the women's side, State women played Red Deer. They won 5-0, and then they had the big rematch against Lethbridge College, and they were able to pull out the 1-0 victories. So they are in first place in the South Division with a record of 10-1, and the way that the way everything looks like it's going to play out, they're in the driver's seat for first place, but they'll end up no worse than second and ranked 13th nationally, and they'll be definitely going to the playoff tournament, not this upcoming weekend, but next weekend up in Edmonton.
Yeah, they still have a match against Medicine Hat College on the weekend, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's their final match, yes.
Okay, yeah. So a couple talking points worth mentioning. Definitely that State men aren't invincible after all, as they lose to second place Red Deer in their first game of the weekend. They obviously got back to their usual winning ways quite quickly, beating Lethbridge 7-0. I imagine that match against Red Deer would have been a really good one. But yeah, better weekend for State's women as they got some revenge over that loss to Lethbridge earlier this season. They've been the two top teams in the division. I was going over some of State's stats, and they've now scored 70 goals this season, or an average of nearly 7 per game. And one player who really sticks out is Megan Wiebe, who has set a single season scoring record for the Trojans. She has 17 goals in 11 games. She also has 11 assists, so she's far and away the ACAC's scoring leader this season. The runner-up in the scoring charts has 10, so she has 7 more than the next highest scorer. And I was looking at her overall career for State, and Wiebe has also scored double digits before. She got 11 in 2021, and she got 9 in 2022. So every season of her ACAC career, she's had more goals than games, which is crazy consistent. She's up to 39 goals in 24 matches overall. Very interesting player. She's actually not particularly young. Like, she's not one of these players who have come into the team straight from high school. She actually went to the University of Calgary and got a degree and wasn't playing soccer during that time, and then kind of came back to it. Yeah, quite the campaign for Megan Wiebe.
Yeah, it's an interesting backstory there. I wasn't too familiar with that. So I guess that just goes to show that there's many different pathways and people take in their career, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like she probably could have had a great in for the Dinos when she was at the U of C, but CTV actually did a story about her back in 2021 when she had her first year with State and was ball in the net every weekend. And she talked about how she wanted to just focus more on her academics. She'd played competitive high-level soccer as a youth, but I guess didn't want to continue that into youth sports. But back to the sport a little bit later. I don't know exactly how old she is, but I would guess mid-20s at least. And she's just tearing up ACAC. So just wanted to give her a shout out because she's had quite the year.
Yeah. Well, those numbers are pretty eye-popping for sure.
Yeah. I mean, State in general, their numbers are eye-popping this year. Like I said, 70 goals in 11 matches, but like she's gotten a big chunk of them and she's assisted on them too. So just wanted to say kudos to Megan Wiebe for a great year. And it's obviously not over yet.
For sure. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com. There's more information there about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. You can also follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.